We are recording. I made sure that the little pink square is lit up. We're good to go. Welcome to another Microsoft Unboxed pod. I am your host today, Kareem Anderson, and I'm joined by.
This is David. I hope everybody's doing well. Let's see, buddy. It's episode 60, so the big 60. Thank you to all our listeners and viewers out there that have stuck with us through 60. And we see that your senior citizen memory has not hit you yet because you still managed to hit the recording before the show started. Good job.
I did this time. It might slip next week. Who knows? It goes in and out of waves. But we are joined on a relatively slow week, probably one of the slowest weeks in news history for Microsoft. But that doesn't mean that there isn't any. We actually have quite a bit to talk about, most of it gaming. But let's get you guys in and out of this pod so you can go about your weekend informed. We have GeForce Now gets, I believe, support is now on officially on Steam Decks. I'll let you get the details of that. We have Qualcomm at Computex early this week, basically saying there will not be an announcement about the follow-up to the X series Snapdragon chip this summer, but we could wait until I believe September when they have their own event to get more information about that, and we'll kind of pontificate on where that leads. PC devices, particularly the Surface lineup, which does usually their annual, I think it's March and June or February and June rollouts of Surface devices, if they're waiting on new chips, and what that could mean for an opportunity for Intel and AMD to kind of step in for this year. We also are going to be talking about Stardock. They have a new update to Fences 6, I believe, and you're going to kind of go through what people can expect with that. We also found some bit of news, and this is from our friends over at Windows Central, particularly Jez Corden, who had a write-up about SteamOS, basically forcing Microsoft to say, hey, let's pull off on our own Xbox handheld and let's try and get down and fix Xbox gaming experiences on PCs or PC handhelds before we lose that market, that nascent market. The other thing we're going to talk about is Call of Duty Black Ops 6. It's going to be, I believe, here for the weekend, so you guys can try and play that. And then we have Sony calling out Game Pass and saying that Microsoft is doing subscriptions all wrong and that it's a danger to the gaming industry in general because Sony didn't think of it first. I don't know. But that being said, I'm going to let David jump in because I've been rambling. So give us our first story, please.
All right, let's see what we got on the docket. Let's jump right in there to something that really caught my attention this week, and I think it's going to catch a lot of gamers' attention, regardless of what you play and regardless of what devices you own. As we know, Steam Deck was the product slash company that started the idea of the handheld. They came out with the Steam Deck. What now? About two
The
and a
PC,
half,
the
3 years.
PC powered one. Remember,
Yeah,
Nintendo had theirs 9 years ago or 10
yeah,
years ago.
that's true. That's true. Nintendo started it. I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave Nintendo out. So the PC powered handheld was started by Steam Deck, and for those that don't know, Steam or Valve does have their own OS called SteamOS. I won't get into the details of what SteamOS is because that's not absolutely related to what we're talking about. But the GeForce Now streaming service is now natively available on the Steam Deck. Now, what does that mean? When you first see that, you say, well, okay, great, another streaming service, something else for me to pay for. Well, you're right, but I want to back up and explain. It gives you a way to get to Xbox. And I think for our Microsoft listeners and viewers, that's a good way to approach it because what did we talk about just last week? You can launch GeForce Now streaming service from the Xbox app on your PC. You can have your choice of what service you want to use to stream your game. Well, part of that partnership with Steam Deck and GeForce Now is from GeForce Now, you can access your Xbox Game Pass streaming membership. Yes, you do have to pay for the GeForce Now subscription. That is a catch in that it's not native. But if you pay for that subscription, you kind of get the best of both worlds. You have access to over 2,200 titles. I'm going to say for most people, all of your titles are probably available via the GeForce Now app on the Steam Deck or via the Xbox Game Pass connection through the GeForce Now app. Now, I get that that's a little bit confusing, but for some people, I think it's going to be worth paying that GeForce Now subscription, putting it on their Steam Deck to keep from having to sideload the Edge browser and then go through the browser setup of being able to try to access your Game Pass titles and subscription through the browser on the Steam Deck, which is not natively supported. Now, it is worth mentioning that in the GeForce Now app, you get more ability to tweak your settings, tweak your resolutions, tweak your aspect ratio. I don't have a Steam Deck or a SteamOS powered handheld yet. Maybe I can get my hands on one and try one out, but this looks to be pretty good. Kind of going to lead us to a couple other stories we're going to talk about. I think it's opened Microsoft's eyes to what we have here. And for me, it's really opened my eyes because we've been complaining about the Windows interface on the handhelds. It needs some tweaking. Well, folks, if you've not used SteamOS on a handheld, watch the videos. Notice how neat, clean, organized, and easy to access that interface is. Throw the Xbox Cloud on top of that. Do I really need that Windows handheld, or do I now have a reason to go buy the one that is SteamOS powered?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, are you going SteamOS powered shopping, my friend?
I personally am not just yet, but we'll get into why that is in 1 second. We're going to get some of the vegetables to our steak and potato dish out of the way. We got the Qualcomm headline I had mentioned earlier about Qualcomm delaying or not delaying, but at least not announcing a Computex, which is what a lot of people expected. Now, again, Qualcomm never came out and said they were going to do anything regarding any updates about the next platform chip, which will be, we're all believing should be the X2, maybe X Elite 2, X Plus 2, probably in the naming scheme, who knows what they're going to call it. But they've never set to any roadmap or time schedule. We're just all expecting it at this point because most chip makers like Intel, AMD, and soon to be NVIDIA have, yearly releases because that helps their partners sell devices with new chips. So they produce new chips. But Qualcomm didn't do that. What they hinted at least when they're on stage, was that they might have an announcement about the X2 chip, which is believed to have 18-core CPU, increased RAM, and probably increased TOPS, and a much improved GPU performance. That was the biggest thing that kind of held a lot of these first wave X chips back, is the GPU performance. Just couldn't keep up with, obviously NVIDIA or even Intel to a certain degree when it comes to certain support for x86 applications, or at least emulating. People best know that when you try to use any of the Adobe Suite stuff like After Effects or Audition or anything like, a DAW system, anything that has multiple layers that require the GPU to kind of organize that. So again, what they did do at Computex was they boasted about the amount of partners they have, the expansion of partners that they have as far as PC makers are concerned. So they aren't just tied to Microsoft, even though Microsoft is one of the biggest cheerleaders for them. They also talked about supporting more AI features on current gen chips and obviously new ones in the future. So again, we are left to expect September to be the announcement timeframe for it, which would then push any release of these probably till next year. What that does is leave sort of a vacuum for this year's models. Now we know that at least with their most prolific partner in Microsoft, that Microsoft is currently doing versions of the Surface Laptop 7 and the Surface Pro 11 with Intel chips, beefed up Intel chips. That's they're currently selling, but they're selling for business because they're making the distinction that Qualcomm is for consumers. Well, that's carrying over from last year. Now you have a full year without another, Qualcomm chip. What do you replace it with? There's rumors about an AMD chip that it should be provided for Surface devices, but that seems to be an underpowered chip, according to Zach Bowden over at Windows Central. So I don't know if they're going to replace it with that, if they're just going to do another year, maybe without a visual refresh on the device itself, it's going to be weird to kind of flush out a Surface Laptop 8 and a Surface Laptop or Surface Pro 12 with the same chip as last year, the same design as last year. Do we just not get new Surface devices? What are your thoughts on this gap that Qualcomm seems to be leaving, for at least from Microsoft devices?
There is a gap, but I think for right now, at least I'm okay with the gap. I think, this is something we talked about earlier in the week in our private conversation. I think people have gotten used to the yearly chip bump. Apple especially, they're pumping out those, there's already there's rumors of the M5 on the day the M4 is announced.
Yeah.
And and we're seeing these little spec bumps from Intel. We're even seeing little spec bumps from AMD in some cases. I'm okay with waiting on a chip if, as you mentioned, the chip that I'm getting is significantly better than the chip I had before. For example, I don't know that it's good for, I'm just going to say, okay, we've got a X chip 1.5, okay, we've got to get something out. We're not ready for the X2, so let's up the clock speeds and we'll call it the X2S or something like that. If you put that next chip out there and it doesn't have the GPU enhancements, for example, that you mentioned the next chip is supposed to have, that doesn't look good. And it means that people are, these Snapdragon chips, we give them 2 years and, they're just not running Adobe or whatever piece of software it is like you wanted. I'm not buying any more Snapdragons. I'm just going to go buy an Apple and be done with it. That's the consumer attitude. I would almost rather sit and wait for a chip that they know is going to do more of what it needs to do to make consumers happy than sit here. As much as I love my Snapdragon laptops and use at least 2 a day for various tasks, I would much rather wait until they know they've got something that's 20%, 30%, 40% better. Give me that GPU so I can use my Adobe Suite, my Clip Champs, and DaVinci Resolves. Make those run a little better. Okay, now I can edit my videos. Guess what? You pulled that audience back in. And then you pulled some people possibly away from Apple who has been known for making thin, efficient, powerful laptops that are able to video edit. Well, now wait. Adobe runs well on this new Snapdragon X2 chip that I waited an extra 9 to 12 months to get. Now I'm interested versus the first one doesn't do it all that well. That 1.5 chip, just to get something out there, still doesn't do it all that well. And consumers said, don't need it anymore. I'll go do something else. So I'll wait for it.
Yeah. I don't have a lot to add to that because you said pretty much what I was thinking. I'm good to wait for it. I think this is part of a plan where, and again, who knows about Qualcomm, but maybe this is they're hinting at Computex, is that they're going to be leaning on their partners maybe for this year. And what that could mean is increased support for the current one. So again, if Adobe comes out and says, hey, we have a beta version of Premiere Pro running natively on the chip, we also are bringing in support for After Effects and Audition and some of these other, we're going to have beta versions for the rest of our suite this year. That is your selling point for the next round of devices. Same thing for Windows. Qualcomm might not have the chip. Again, if you can't change the hardware, you change the software. When people, come out with a phone and a phone, say there are 2 phones in a cycle, and people are trying to figure out why would I get this phone when they can visually see, even though the specs, the camera, the chips, the battery, the weight, all of that are all the same. But if the operating system is different or improved, that is your selling point. And when you can't improve the operating system, then you improve the specs. Those are one of the 2 ways that you do it. So again, if you can't improve the chip, maybe Windows 11 finally gets more polished, gets more features, and then you say, hey, this is why you want to get the next, the 2025, 26 versions of Windows PCs because you're getting a new visual improvement. You're getting, more support, more features. Same thing for the expansion of support for the chip itself. There are more apps that were pulled from your, ARM phone that are now running natively on these chips, or things that were x86 are now running natively supported on this new platform that Microsoft should still be working on to bring in more people. And that's, your selling point for the device. So who knows, going into, I think this is, the start of back to season when it comes to marketing and crafting and ordering the amount of devices people need. That's what they're going to be doing for the next 2 months. So they can start selling them towards the end of the summer. And again, maybe that's what they focus on and say, all right, we'll save, the big reveal for next year. And then that'll compete with the new AMD that's coming out, and that will compete with Intel, whatever they recover from Lunar Lake and whatever they have designed next. The NVIDIA, I believe, is coming out with their own chips as well. So there will be a lot of competition next year. We'll see what they announce in September and if the wait will be worth it. Moving on to our next topic, we have, and I don't know why I kept the Steam Deck up because we talked about a whole different thing. That was this. And there you go. This again for people who are watching or listening, just a delay in slides. But the next slide is Stardock. What do you got for us in that regard?
Stardock kind of reminds me of some of the indie game title developers. Stardock is not they have a lot of customers, a lot of clients, but they're not on the forefront of software, and they certainly don't do things that you think about always, but that's what makes them interesting. With this particular product, we have Fences 6. Now, what the heck is Fences 6? The best way I know how to describe it to you, I kind of understand the name. The name Fences, like a fence in your yard, but I want you to picture fences on your desktop. For example, the right side of your desktop, you can set up a place to put your documents. Below that, maybe a place to put your downloads. On the other side, maybe a tabbed interface with a place to put your streaming apps or your chat apps and have everything there together. Maybe you just want to put your documents for work in that area. And I am not one, as we kind of joke about here on the pod, when I fire up a system, be it new, be it old or whatever, I do not change the desktop. I leave the desktop as it is, and I let Microsoft put the icons down on the left-hand side and, do the 2x2 and then 3x3 and then the 4x4. I'm that person that has half their screen set up as icons. Fences allows you to segment that. I actually tried a copy of Fences yesterday, and this old man here may have to change the way he organizes his desktop. With this new version, you get tabbed interfaces. You get where you can set your icons. You can colorize things, like say you want things for work that are blue. You want things for your home finances that are red. And I want to read a quote here that Brad Sams, who is the general manager of Stardock Software, said, Fences is widely recognized as the best way to organize your desktop and the new features in Fences 6. It is now the best tool for managing not only your desktop, but every desktop within your organization. So what Brad is telling us there is they do have business editions of Fences for those people that need to organize their business documents. Say you're a CEO of a company and you need to organize the development team, the finance team, the marketing team, the sales team, and you need to be able to get to those things very quickly on your desktop. You can get a Fences business license and actually roll that out with controls of who gets what features. Now, probably the best part of this is this software is very inexpensive. Fences 6 is $9.99 for consumer and enterprise customers, or it's a part of their Object Desktop software, which is the software suite that Stardock has that includes basically everything that they offer except a few small items. And a lot of people pay for that Object Desktop subscription and get a little bit of everything. I'm just going to tell you, check out Fences 6, check out Stardock.com in general. They've got a lot of cool things to customize your desktop. For example, if you're a Windows 95, Windows 98 fan, they do have a tool where you can put that start menu back down there in the corner. When you click, it pops up just like it did in 95, 98. They do some cool stuff over there. Go check it out.
Yeah, I don't have, again, much to add to this except for an analogies for people who are Samsung users or Android phone users. This is essentially the Nova launcher of Windows. I think Rainmeter is another version of something similar, but that only does service level UI changes. This does more functionality. So think of it as like maybe Good Luck, I think it is for
Yeah, good luck.
Samsung. Just gives you added features to kind of customize your Windows. So if you're a power user and you maybe Power Tools is a little too complicated for you, this might be the more friendly consumer version, more plug and play version to add features to Windows. That being said, we're moving on to our gaming section. This is all downhill from here, ladies and gentlemen. We got the hard part out of the way. We're going to do some of the fun parts, at least as gamers concerned. This isn't fun for Microsoft because the next story is basically a warning. Our friend over at Windows Central, Jess Corden, I believe yesterday wrote a story about Microsoft reportedly internally is pumping the brakes on its Xbox handheld. For those of you who are hoping for that soon, you might hear the wonk wonk sound, but for good reason. I think early on in this pod, at the very beginning, our first story, David hinted at why would anybody buy or choose a Windows-powered handheld over a SteamOS one when you can get Game Pass on there as well. And in particular, over the last, I don't know, week or so, there have been a handful of, or growing voice of reviewers online, particularly in YouTube, that have been singing the praises of SteamOS and how easy it is, and how, because Lenovo went out on a limb and put SteamOS on one of its handhelds, that we have a direct comparison now between the performance of SteamOS and the performance of Windows. Normally you have the Steam Deck has different specs than a Lenovo that's powered by Windows. And since we don't have an actual handheld from Microsoft and Xbox, this is the closest we'll get. So it's the same exact device. The Lenovo Legion Go S is powered by a Steam version and a Windows version. Same specs across the board. The only difference is the operating system. And what one of the reviewers, and one of the more prominent ones, is Dave TD, realized that SteamOS performs and runs better, gives you longer battery life, smoother transitions. The UI is built in a much more functional way to get in and out of gaming. And it's not built on top of Windows, so you don't run into the same sort of updated driver situations, the updated version numbers, the security patches that Windows goes through. You're not dealing or managing with Windows on top of your gaming experience. So with that being said, if you have Game Pass available at SteamOS, why not just get the SteamOS version of something? And you're also saving money, because I think it's about roughly translates to about $50 more to get a Windows powered one, because that's the Windows license that every OEM is going to have to pay in order to have the version. So an Asus ROG Ally will be probably about $50 more, or $50 more, or $50 less, depending on how you see it, if they did a Steam version of this. SteamOS also is a Linux variant, so it has an actual operating system. So if you thought the advantage was like, hey, if I need to, I can turn this handheld into a quick, makeshift operating system setup on my, if you have a monitor, so I can just plug a USB in or an HDMI cable in and have it run Windows. Well, SteamOS has a desktop version that seems to be fair, good enough for in a pinch kind of things. But these are, designed primarily for gaming. Anyway, more details on this is that Microsoft has told the team to pause and pivot on making the Xbox app more user-friendly, something better to compete with SteamOS. Now, there's no mention of how they plan to go about doing this or when the time frame is, but we do know at least that Microsoft is concerned enough to say, hey, we got to stop focusing on hardware. We got to start focusing on software, because if they end up losing this segment early on, it's going to be hard for them to get back. What are your thoughts about improving the Windows handheld gaming systems? Can Microsoft do it? Can they do it in time? Or is Steam already built enough steam, pun intended, to beat Windows in this segment?
I think you can answer that a couple different ways. I think it's fair to say that Microsoft is behind in the gaming infrastructure and making games more accessible on handheld. Let me make that clear. Steam has been doing this. Steam has one job: make games playable, sell games. They built their own ecosystem to put games on Steam and make this work. So then they made hardware to make it accessible to consumers. They were smart enough to make what appears to be a very consumer-friendly ecosystem for gamers to play, which is what gamers need. I love my handheld. I have one of the first Lenovo Legion Go, the first version with the detachable controllers. But I still get aggravated. I'm aggravated with Windows right now. I went to update my Call of Duty last night. What happened? I clicked over there on, in the Xbox app where it says update. It downloaded the first 2 or 3 gigs and went to 0 bytes. Rebooted the handheld, same thing. Reinstalled the Xbox app, same thing. Looked at all the Reddit forums and the Microsoft support forums, tried all those tricks, same thing. So what am I going to have to do? I'm likely going to have to refresh, which means reinstall everything on my handheld, just because of that one quirk. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a quirk in SteamOS somewhere that might make you have to do something that you don't want to do. But you have to look at it from the gamer's point of view. This is an issue that Windows has. Windows has other issues too. The touch interface could be better on these handhelds. We could have an interface where maybe OneDrive doesn't load automatically. Maybe they just give you the choice. Do you want a stripped down version of Windows, no OneDrive, and any other features they can turn off? You just want to game on this device. That would be a start. But I think, like we talked about, they need to retool it a little bit. Maybe have a different operating system. Does it have to be called Windows? No. It could be something else. There could be something like we talked about off mic, and I'm just going to touch this and move on. There could be a consumer version of Windows. There could be a business version of Windows. There could be a handheld version of Windows. But Microsoft has got to fix some of these issues. I understand why they pulled back on their own handheld, and they're still moving forward with the Ally X2, I believe it's going to be called. They're still moving forward with that, and we're still projected to get that sometime by the end of the year. But if Microsoft wants to stay in this game, they better get to work on that interface, because like I mentioned in the GeForce Now post, I've already done the Google search for Lenovo SteamOS powered handheld, and if having that device gets me access to both ecosystems and improves my experience, then Microsoft, you kind of lost the boat there. And I feel like they're holding on to the ski rope, but that ski rope's getting a little thin in the middle. And if they don't fix it, it's going to break, and Microsoft is going to go this way and the boat's going to go this way.
Yeah. Some of the things that they're focused on, and I believe it's in Project Keenan, if I'm saying that correctly, is performance and optimization, obviously addressing underlying performance issues to ensure a smoother gaming experience. I don't know what that means. Sounds like a lot of corporate talk from the Windows team. I don't know. One of the ways that you've already mentioned is streamlining the update process in general. Maybe you don't have as many updates pushed through that aren't gaming related to this version of Windows, so you don't have to bother with those. Battery life improvements. That's one of the other bigger things. No matter what games Dave TD, who's doing the head-to-head comparison we're playing, he's coming up about 2 to 4 hours shy of what the SteamOS version of the same hardware produces. That's inexcusable and unquestionably something Microsoft needs to change. You go from 2 to 2.5 hours of gaming, even on platformers or side scrollers, to 6 on the Steam Deck. You have to figure out a way to optimize Windows in order to get that back. And Windows has never been good at that. That has been a 40-year problem for most things. That is part of the Wintel issue, and the reason why people are choosing the M series Max, and even to a lesser extent Chrome OS, is for battery. At the end of the day, we are, at least here in the U.S., a nation on the go. I'm sure in European countries, everywhere else, people are going and doing things more, which is why more computing is done on the smartphone than it is on these, even super light, ultra books. It's not that we can't sit down in corner somewhere, in a corner somewhere on the floor and bust our laptop. It's that you have to do a value proposition on using that battery life on that laptop, on that screen. If I had a screen that I can open up, a 14-inch screen, throughout the rest of the day without having to carry an extra battery, I can just carry the thing that looks like a book throughout my day, I would use that probably more than I would use on the phone. I'd be more efficient, to be honest with you. But I have to weigh that out, because every time I open up the screen, that is battery life that I have to compute. Like, hey, will this make me through the end of the day, or will I just be carrying a paperweight from 2 o'clock on? Will this book thing, this metal book that I have in my hand, not be useful? So and that all is to say that the same issues are coming with the Steam Deck versus the Windows powered PC, handheld PC. You want people to be able to hop on these things and do 3, maybe 4 hours of gaming, depending on the game itself, and walk away saying, hey, that was well worth the investment. That was well worth my time holding this thing, versus saying, you know what, I'll just wait till I get home and play it on the console, or I'll get a Steam Deck instead, because I can do that. And that is, again, a big coefficient that I don't know if Windows will ever really get done in its current form, which is what you and I talked about off mic, is that Microsoft may just need to come up with a whole different operating system. I know Xbox runs on a version of Windows, a kernel of Windows. I don't know how that performs when it's not plugged in. We've never seen that before. It's never been a question that we've had to encounter, because the Xboxes have always been plugged in. Now they do have energy saving modes and stuff, but they've always been plugged in. So I don't know if there's even a version of the Xbox gaming app or Xbox app from the console that is as power efficient as SteamOS, but I have to figure it out. The other thing is touchscreen user experience. This goes back to Windows 8 and the early days of Windows 10 that Microsoft essentially seems to abandon. Now, I think that Windows 11 has good touch features, but can be better optimized for touch. The settings menu, I think there's a mode called compact mode for the Xbox app, which basically spreads things out and moves things in a more touch-friendly environment. There needs to be that for Windows, a compact mode that spreads things out a little bit more than it currently does, and prioritizes the touch aspects of certain things in the UI for Windows. Now, I don't know how that's going to be done. We don't need to have a whole Windows 8 fiasco all over again, where everything's touch and flipping and turning and tiling or whatever. But there needs to be an emphasis on, hey, these apps up front, the inbox apps, like File Explorer is going to be one of them. Settings is going to be another. These things need to be optimized for touch when you get in that compact mode, because that's what people are going to be interacting with. Now, you don't need to make control panel or the task manager, any of these, more, niche power user kind of things touch friendly, at least not to that same extent, but at least the ones that people are interacting with. And if you're a gamer, settings are probably going to be that. So if you can either build it into the Xbox app or make the settings more accessible for them when they want to start changing stuff like that, that's something you can address. But again, this is just one story. We're talking about SteamOS at least presenting Microsoft with a challenge, and this is early on. Again, we also have to caveat most of this conversation with Windows-powered handhelds are a niche thing. They haven't caught on yet. This is, you're not seeing commercials for them the same as you would for a PlayStation or Xbox. But soon, I believe soon, as someone who's been using one for over a year and a half now, and if you've used a Nintendo Switch, there is a longevity for these things. There's life there, and Microsoft is starting to lose that. SteamOS had been out. The benefit from Microsoft and Windows was that you can connect all of your gaming platforms and subscription services and all those things through Windows. Steam only had Steam, but now that they got Xbox Game Pass and that you just said they got GeForce as well, next all they got left is like EA, Activision. They get a couple of these other ones, and Microsoft's big advantage is right out the window.
That SteamOS powered handheld, I hate to say, is looking better all the time
and cheaper.
Yeah.
So Microsoft, get on it. We'll keep you updated as much as we can as far as what's a rumor, what's fact, over this time frame, and who hopefully edges out. Actually, I'll put this last story, this Call of Duty story last because it kind of goes in the weekend. But on a tangential note, we got a Sony versus Xbox, which is something that kind of works in relation to the handhelds. Sony was speaking to, I believe, Game Informer, if I'm not mistaken, it's the head, Shuei Yoshida, and he expressed concern that Xbox Game Pass is, quote, dangerous, arguing that the subscription model could empower large companies to dictate gaming creation, potentially hindering innovation from smaller developers. You can go find the article at the interview at Game Informer, but I, along with another author over at Windows Central, have some counterpoints to his argument. Again, his argument is basically saying that because the popularity of subscription services will start to have a audience capture moment where developers will create games that are tailored towards being on a subscription service versus just being creative to create your own game, creating it to find or to entertain an audience. And again, that audience could be niche, that could be indie, that could be small. He's saying that because games that only are designed for subscription will work on subscription services, that's all we're going to get. We're going to start losing, some perhaps RPGs or platformers or side scrollers. The more smaller indie games that are 2 or 3 hours to complete, those are all going to go by the wayside for things that can be done over a long period of time, so people feel like they're getting the money's worth. What do you think about his argument before we get into a counter argument? Do you think there's valid, like, hey, going forward, people will only make things that can be subscribed to over months period of time versus like, hey, here's a indie game that, only takes you 2 hours to beat?
Well, I think it boils down to what consumers want. I think consumers are basically telling us what they want. And I think consumers want the Game Pass style of play.
Here's a question, though.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was Steve Jobs or something like that. Like, there are some people who believe that you tell a consumer what they want. Like, they have no idea of what they don't know, essentially. So to your point about the police simulator.
Yeah, there's a police simulator on Xbox, and without Game Pass, we talked about it I believe it was last week or week before during free play days. And without Game Pass, without free play days, I would have never picked up Police Simulator. That is made by a smaller indie company. Pretty good game. There was a game that we mentioned the week before with the moving. It was like a moving simulator because you and I talked about, moving out. Would we have picked up Moving Out without free play days and Game Pass? Probably not. So I think, to your point, there is some validity to companies tell consumers what they want because the companies produce the choices. And they say, yes, you want this. You really do. Because, look, you've got Call of Duty over here, but you've got this little indie game here that's fun. You don't want to be serious. You got something that's fun. I like fun. I'm a fun guy. I like to pick up some of these titles and say it one more time, have fun. And I feel like if you don't have these subscription services, go to your Xbox app. Tell you what, go to your Xbox app. Scroll through the Game Pass titles. I will say there is at least, and probably more, there's at least 15 or 20 right there on the home screen that are not your top tier Call of Duty, Forza's, Starfield, that are games you've never heard of. But what are you going to do because you have that subscription? I don't have to pay for this game over here that I don't recognize. But because I have the subscription, I'm going to try it. Which means that company made money. Whereas if it's sitting, remember back to your GameStop days. When we walked into GameStop, what did we do? Every one of us, we went over there to where the AAA titles were. That's the first place a lot of people go. You didn't go a little bit further down to where there's the less known ones because you weren't sure if it was good and you really didn't want to put that money down because you'd never heard of it. You hadn't seen the marketing. Well, guess what? That doesn't mean that a game's not good. That maybe they put their money in the game and they had to let the marketing budget slide a little bit so you don't see all the posters, the commercials, the ads. But because you had Game Pass, you go over there and you click Police Simulator, you click Moving Out and go, wait a minute, I'm actually having fun. And that gives these developers a chance to do things.
I mean, the author of the piece over Windows Switcher is basically echoing the same things. His points are that there's already currently a diverse game selection and Game Pass. So you can get anything from your Call of Duty, which, day and day release or whatnot, your AAA titles, or you can get something more esoteric as, your Police Simulator currently. So it isn't like audience capture has got into effect just yet. Game Pass has been around for going on 4 or 5 years now. There's support for unique projects. Microsoft first-party studios and publishing efforts greenlight unique projects, sort of like Grounded. If you guys remember that, where it's basically like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which has been pretty fun. Pentiment and South of Midnight. South of Midnight, I'm almost done with. Awesome game. Again, don't know if I would have gone out and bought it based on the marketing, even from Microsoft's own perspective, and that was one of their Game Pass titles. If I had seen that, hey, I had to pay $80 for it, and I don't really know the developer all that well, even though it looks cool, I don't know if I would have done that. But thanks to Game Pass, I proudly pay my $20 a month and got a great game because of that. And again, that's supporting them. There's platforms for indie success. Again, Game Pass has bolstered the reach and popularity of independent games like Ballerato, Buckshot, Roulette, Vampire Survivors, Valheim, and other games of B, C level quality. But again, that's a chance for people who made that, who have either lost an audience or didn't have a chance to market. Like you said, they gave it the marketing budget, but now they have a chance to get that audience on Game Pass when people scroll through it. There's developer endorsements. Many developers have a lot of Game Pass for its effectiveness in connecting the games with a broader audience. There's player choice. Again, you're not stuck with just AAA titles. Microsoft puts a whole bunch of stuff on there sometimes, just like Netflix, you take things off, unfortunately. But there's also partnerships, I think, that are business related, that go into revenue share, that go into cloud and Azure support, as far as supporting the development of these games from the start. So Microsoft may not have bought a studio, and it may not have been in their cadre of gaming titles, but they might see a project that would do well in Game Pass, which would benefit them as far as engagement is concerned, and benefit the developer as far as an audience. And they'll say, hey, how about we work out a partnership where we give you free Azure in order to finish developing this game? We may not give you, full money in hand, but whatever it costs you to, hold the cloud and put all these assets on and stuff like that, we will front that in for you because we have, that's what we do. But we would like your title on Game Pass. That's something you couldn't do without the subscription service. Again, a lot, just for anybody who's had cable, who even has, Netflix. Bigger titles help subsidize smaller things. And that's how this Game Pass works. So if you want more indie games, stuff like that, it'd behoove Microsoft to encourage some of the bigger developers to come on board so that they can, do the revenue share and make sure that people who are smaller capacity get some of that, trickle down effect, and they can survive by using Game Pass.
So, buddy, basically what you're saying is, since big things subsidize small things, you're saying the MacBook and the Mac Pro and the iMac and the Mac Studio subsidize the Vision Pro. Is that what we're saying?
Essentially, that is exactly what happened. Yeah. The success of actual products people want help Apple create this dream device that nobody really cares about. So we'll see how long that subsidization works. Like this isn't forever. You can't, subsidize a $3,500 device that nobody wants. Eventually, something's got to give. But interestingly enough, Sony had their own take on this, and they said that the way that they're doing it is better, and the way that they're doing it essentially is by saying, our AAA games, you go out and buy, you go out and pay the $60, $70, $80 for. And then down the road, just like in movie, the old movie scheme where, it comes out in theaters first, 6 months down the road, we'll then put it on VHS or DVD or whatever. And then 3 months after that, we'll put it on cable. And after that, then we'll put it on network television. And if you're a person who's waiting on network television, it may take you a year or two before you get to see this product. But that works out for everybody because guess what? Sony gets their money up front.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say. Sony wants that money up front. And, after that, well, maybe you will get it. Maybe you'll get it in 6 months. Maybe you'll get it in a year. We've already got our money. Well, David, the consumer over here, lives in 2025. Sony just talked themselves right out of me buying a PlayStation. I hate to say it, but I think, there's an argument there that, Sony has always killed Microsoft in hardware. We know that. But at the end of the day, I'm a Phil Spencer guy. I'm a gamer. I want access to titles. Doesn't have to be everything AAA. Doesn't have to be, I don't need it to be everything indie either, or you've, lost me on that side of things. But Sony, that money up front thing, I ain't too sure about that.
Well, I mean, it works for them if it's money up front, but don't then ask for 20 or I think what is theirs? Theirs is like $17, something like that, for a subscription service afterwards. Because the proposition that Microsoft offers is that, hey, if we have a Spider-Man, it's a AAA title, and you have Game Pass, and you've been paying $20, $25, whatever a month for it, you get it as soon as it's out. You don't have to wait a year. You don't have to pay $20 a month for a year in order to get it later. Sony's saying, hey, if we have our Spider-Man game, won't be on our subscription service, but keep paying the $20 a month to play some of these other games that aren't there. And eventually it'll show up on here. So you'll have paid, $20 a month, or I guess $17 a month for a year, maybe a year and a half too. And now it'll be worth it because now Spider-Man's there. And it's like, well, I could have just paid you the $70 and got rid of the whole subscription service. I'll buy it day one, but I'm not going to also pay for your subscription service. So again, you're just doing one or the other. If you're in the Sony world, I doubt many people are saying, hey, I'm going to pay $70 up front and $20 a month. And I guess you have to do online, but to do your streaming service, your subscription service, I'm not doing both. And Sony's saying, all right, well, if you're not going to do both, do the first because we want our money up front. Microsoft's saying, we're subsidizing the money up front so that everybody can get a chance to play a ton of games. But we do want money throughout the whole year in order to do that. So if you only plan on playing one or two, I think it's, what do we come up with the number 3 AAA titles?
3
throughout the year.
3 plus about $15.
Yeah, throughout the year that you might save on that. So if you bought a PlayStation for that, God bless you. But if you like to play other games, newer games, not just like, hey, I'm going to replay. I bought Call of Duty, I'm going to replay something old, an old PlayStation game for the next half a year. Then it makes more sense, at least financially speaking, to do what Microsoft's doing. And I understand he's a Sony exec and he wants to push what Sony's doing. He wants to applaud what they're doing. Good for them. It just doesn't make financial sense to do it that way that they're doing it. It's antiquated. Without also producing its own handheld, who's to say that they won't have something next year for that? I could also play the most recent Spider-Man game through Steam, and they offer discounts. So I'm never going to, at least currently speaking, there's no point in me doing a Sony subscription service. I'll just wait till it comes on Steam for discount. Can
I throw the whole toolbox of? I want to throw the toolbox in on this one. I think this is one thing we've left out. Sony, are you listening? Do you care about this little podcast? Where is your PC app? Where's your phone access? Where's your tablet access? Where's your MacBook access? Where's your Steam Deck access? I'm not doing it your way. And I don't think and I don't think when it comes down to playing your titles, I don't think gamers are going to do it that way.
Hey, they never said play anywhere. They said play on PlayStation.
Well, I'm a play anywhere guy because, I'm doing the pod here on a Snapdragon laptop and we're having a little fun with this. But as soon as this pod's over, I could go pick up my Xbox controller, open up my Xbox app, and stream something. Play a game during lunch. I can pull out my phone, play Police Simulator via cloud during lunch. I can't do that, Sony. You don't have it. So how about you look at the Xbox way of doing things? I'm not saying you need to do it the Xbox way, but I think there's a happy medium in there somewhere for you.
Couldn't have said it better. Our last topic is Call of Duty, my friend. What do you got for us this weekend?
Well, we got those free play days. I have noticed and I actually have gotten some feedback from a few folks that you guys actually like us mentioning these free play days. So I got something a little special out here. This week you have, let's see, let me make sure I get these right. It's after Memorial Day weekend. We have, let's see, where did my post go? There it is.
We have Division 2.
Yep, Tom Clancy's Division 2.
Which is one of my favorites.
Yep, I'm going to try that one this weekend. We've got Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is one of those free, try it. You get it until June the 3rd. That is just the multiplayer, which is what most people want, and the zombies, which is what most people want. So if you're looking to jump in on the campaign, that's not there. Then you've got one called Ark Survival Ascended. I have seen this game out there a few times. I have not tried it. Again, that'll be one that, guess what? It's free this weekend. I'm going to try it. Kind of goes against our, last story. It's give us a chance to try these smaller titles or these lesser known titles. And then there's one called Football Manager 2024. I'm guessing Football Manager 2025 will come later. Not very familiar with the football and baseball manager games. So if somebody wants to educate me on what those are, maybe I need to spend my free trial this weekend and go try it. But that's available. I know the Call of Duty Black Ops 6 trial, if you're not already a Game Pass subscriber, might be a big Division 2 will probably be your biggest deal out of this that most people are going to try. And remember, if for some reason you're not a Game Pass subscriber and you want to own these games, make sure you buy them during the trial. You get a pretty good deal. Tom Clancy's Division 2 is $23.99. The Vault Edition, which gets you some extra features, I think it's some skins in there, is down to $64.99. Football Manager 2024 is $14.99. And one that I left out, I'm going to make sure I get this right. Killer Clowns from Outer Space is $11.99. And Ark Survival Ascended is $22.49. Let's back up for just a minute. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I'm kind of going to prove one of our big topics here. Who has heard of Killer Clowns from Outer Space? Have you heard of that one?
I have, because it's a movie. And it came out in the early 90s, if I'm not mistaken, mid 90s.
Maybe that's why I've not heard of it. I was not a big movie. I was doing the college thing, and movies kind of got pushed aside there because I had to study. But I think, for people in 2025, if you've not heard of that, is that a title you're going to go to GameStop and purchase? Probably not.
Probably not.
But
unless you're a big fan of the movie.
Right. But because it's here on Game Pass and on free play days, what are you likely to do? Well, let me try that out. And it might lead to a $14.99 purchase, which helps out those smaller developers. Way to go, Mike.
1988 is when that movie came out.
1988 or 98?
1988.
Well, I know darn well I wasn't watching too many movies in 88. And if I was, I sure don't remember it.
I'm sure our parents wouldn't allow us to watch that.
Probably not. We were still watching Old Yeller back then.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Is that all you have, or
I think it wraps it up. So I mean, and it sounds like from the titles that you mentioned, we kind of have an insight on what your weekend's going to be like. But if you want to elaborate, go ahead, and we'll let people know what we're doing this weekend.
Yep, I'm going to try out the Division 2, and I'm going to hope that runs well on my handheld because that's where I'm going to be this weekend after I get the Xbox app issue sorted out. I'm going to be trying out some Division 2. I might go try out the ARC game there. Might even go see what Football Manager 2024 is about. Otherwise, me and some friends are probably going to get together, do a little sim racing, maybe do a little Call of Duty. Weather here this weekend after today is supposed to be decent, so may go touch some grass and get some vitamin D in the process too. But tonight is supposed to be rough weather, so as long as the juices are flowing through the power lines and the internet cables, I'm going to be somewhere curled up playing on a handheld. How about yourself?
Yeah, my night's gonna be on the handheld. I got to finish up South at Midnight. My wife and daughters are up in Orlando for a beauty pageant thing, so I got some free time to play some games, which I plan on doing. I might hit up a movie tomorrow for a matinee because that's the cheapest. Finally go see Sinners, and then probably back to more video game playing. So I got South at Midnight. I got Shadow of Mordor, I think is downloaded on mine. I'm waiting for a driver update so I can play Doom. But those will be the least the two games I'm playing this weekend. Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
One more thing. I think you had a birthday this week. You had a birthday Wednesday.
I did on Wednesday.
We won't talk about his age. We'll leave that out there. But happy birthday, buddy! And anybody watching this, we wish my buddy here happy birthday. But if you want to find me on social and play some games or wish him happy birthday together, David PAJ 1978 over at Blue Sky. That's kind of where I am these days. I do still get the Twitter notifications or the X notifications. I do still get them. And I do still open it if I see something interesting, but really spending time over there, not so much.
Yeah,
where are you?
At Happy Hulk at Blue Sky as well. Happy Hulk, one word. I got rid of the app so I don't get any notifications, which is kind of nice. I'm strictly on Blue Sky. Every now and then I'll go on Threads to talk about comics, but that's about it. So find me there, or you can find me online, I guess gaming wise, as Minehead1. That's across Xbox, and Activision, and all the other ones. So if you want to play against me on anything, mind you, I don't play a lot of multiplayer games, but if you do see me, say hello. Other than that, hope you guys have a great weekend. Hope the weather's fine where you're at. If it's not, hope you can have an activity that is weatherproof, so to speak. And you guys have a great weekend. Thank you for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next week with more Microsoft news.
See you guys next week. Have a good weekend.